Welcome to True Crime Threads. Today we uncover the tragic story of the dark secret of the Abbot and the Nun. In a quiet countryside stood St. Benedict's Abbey, a place of worship and refuge for those seeking peace and spiritual guidance. Its ancient stone walls, weathered by centuries of prayer and devotion, seemed to emanate a sense of solemnity. The Abbey's leader, Chris, a young and charismatic abbot, was admired not only for his unwavering faith but also for his ability to connect with people. He brought a sense of hope and renewal to a community weighed down by life's trials, becoming a beacon of light for those in need. His sermons inspired, his presence comforted, and his leadership breathed new life into the Abbey's once dwindling congregation. Helen arrived at the Abbey quietly one autumn afternoon, seeking solace from a troubled past. Her soft-spoken nature and graceful demeanor quickly drew attention, but it was her piety and dedication that won the hearts of those around her. Helen immersed herself in the duties of the convent, her delicate hands tending to the garden and her melodic voice lifting spirits during prayers. Though she wore her faith like a shield, the weight of her unspoken history lingered, hidden behind her serene expression. The Abbey became her sanctuary, a place where she could rebuild her life in service to others. Among the nuns, Helen stood out as a source of inspiration, her quiet strength and unyielding commitment shining brightly. For Chris, she represented the very essence of devotion, embodying the ideals he had long aspired to uphold. For months, the Abbey thrived under Chris's compassionate leadership and Helen's nurturing influence. Yet, as time passed, a subtle connection began to form between them, one that neither could fully understand nor control. It started with fleeting glances during prayers, accidental brushes of hands in the hallways, and moments of shared silence that seemed to carry the weight of unspoken words. These small interactions, though innocent at first, planted the seeds of something both sacred and forbidden. Chris found himself drawn to Helen's quiet strength, her presence stirring emotions he had vowed to suppress. Helen, in turn, admired Chris's unwavering faith and his ability to inspire others, feeling she struggled to reconcile with her own commitment to God. The bond between them grew in ways they could not explain, creating an undercurrent of tension that rippled through the Abbey. What began as mutual admiration slowly transformed into a tangled web of emotions neither could escape. Beneath their holy duties and the Abbey's tranquil facade, a dark and unyielding force took root, threatening to unravel everything they held dear. Though they swore to remain true to their vows, their hearts whispered a dangerous truth, a truth that would forever alter the course of their lives. The whispers began quietly, like an invisible thread weaving through the Abbey's halls. At first they were little more than fleeting remarks exchanged during moments of hushed conversation. Some of the nuns noticed subtle changes in Helen's behavior. She began slipping away to the library during odd hours, lingering in the solitude of its dimly lit corridors longer than necessary. Her previously steady gaze now held a flicker of restlessness, a reflection of some unseen turmoil. Chris, too, was not immune to observation. His once clear sermons, known for their wisdom and eloquence, grew more impassioned, as though he were wrestling with something far beyond the scriptural themes he preached. The intensity of his words left many inspired, but others found it unsettling. In a place as insular as the Abbey, even the smallest changes became points of speculation. The storm that brewed outside one evening mirrored the growing unease within the Abbey. Sheets of rain battered the stone walls, and thunder rolled through the hills, shaking the foundation of the sacred refuge. That night, a cloaked figure claimed to have seen Chris and Helen standing together in the garden, their silhouettes illuminated briefly by a flash of lightning. The sighting was brief, and the details were unclear, but it was enough to ignite suspicion. Rumors spread like wildfire, moving from one set of lips to the next, taking on a life of their own. Did Chris and Helen linger too long in their shared tasks? Was their connection rooted in something beyond faith? No one dared confront them directly, but the air grew thick with doubt. The pressure of the rumors weighed heavily on both Chris and Helen. Chris, once a paragon of confidence and composure, began withdrawing from the others. He spent more time locked in his quarters, poring over ancient texts, as though searching for an answer to the turmoil that churned within him. Helen, on the other hand, became a picture of nervous energy, her every movement scrutinized by watchful eyes. When questioned indirectly by senior members of the clergy, Chris defended his actions with fervor, denying any impropriety and admonishing the spread of baseless accusations. Helen, though quiet and composed, maintained her innocence, her calm exterior masking the storm within. Still, the damage was done. Trust, once the cornerstone of life at the Abbey, began to crumble. What had been a sanctuary of faith now felt like a prison of scrutiny. Each decision Chris made seemed to alienate those who once revered him, while Helen's every action was dissected for hidden meaning. Beneath the surface, the bond between them only grew stronger, a volatile connection forged in secrecy, guilt, and fear. The cracks in the Abbey's foundation deepened, threatening to shatter the fragile peace that remained. One morning, a chilling letter arrived at the bishop's desk in the diocese office, written in a neat but anonymous hand. Its contents were damning, outlining an alleged affair between Chris and Helen, and urging immediate action to preserve the sanctity of St. Benedict's Abbey. The letter described moments of supposed intimacy and painted a picture of moral corruption festering within the sacred walls. Its tone demanded an investigation, leaving the bishop little choice but to act. News of the bishop's intervention spread rapidly. The Abbey, once a serene haven of faith, was thrown into disarray. A team of investigators was dispatched, arriving with solemn expressions and a mandate to uncover the truth. Their presence alone was enough to send ripples of anxiety through the Abbey. The nuns whispered nervously among themselves, their unease heightened by the investigators' sharp questioning and meticulous searches. Chris, as the abbot, bore the brunt of the scrutiny. Every aspect of his leadership was examined, his sermons dissected for signs of personal conflict or hidden messages. His quarters were thoroughly searched, yielding an unsettling discovery. Hidden within a drawer, wrapped in a simple cloth, was a journal. Its pages revealed Chris's personal reflections, raw and deeply conflicted entries about his struggle with temptation and his feelings for Helen. To the investigators, the journal was damning evidence, a written confession of emotions that crossed the boundaries of his vows. Chris insisted the journal was a tool for spiritual reflection, a private record of his battle to remain faithful to his calling. He argued that it proved his commitment to overcoming human weakness, but the investigators were unconvinced. Helen was not spared from interrogation. Her every movement was scrutinized, her responses analyzed for inconsistencies. Though she maintained her composure, the mounting pressure began to take its toll. The once gentle glow in her eyes faded into a shadow of exhaustion, her voice trembling slightly as she answered the relentless stream of questions. As the investigation dragged on, tensions within the Abbey reached a boiling point. The nuns, already unsettled by the rumors, found their trust in their leaders wavering. Many began to distance themselves from both Chris and Helen, fearing association with the scandal that now gripped their sacred refuge. The journal's discovery shifted the narrative against Chris, and rumors of excommunication loomed. Though no concrete evidence of an affair surfaced, the seeds of doubt were firmly planted. The Abbey's reputation, built on centuries of devotion and sanctity, was now overshadowed by suspicion and betrayal. For Chris and Helen, the walls of the Abbey that once offered solace now felt like the closing bars of a prison, their bond trapped under the relentless weight of judgment. As the investigation at St. Benedict's Abbey continued, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. Helen, once the picture of quiet composure, found herself at the center of a storm she couldn't control. It began with murmurs among the nuns, but soon escalated to something more sinister. Anonymous notes started appearing under her door, scrawled in sharp, jagged handwriting. The messages were chilling in their simplicity, each carrying a similar threat: leave the Abbey, or face divine punishment. The notes unnerved Helen deeply. Though she maintained an outward calm, the mounting fear began to seep into her demeanor. Her steps became hurried, her glances more frequent, as though expecting a shadow to emerge from every corner. She confided her fears to Chris, who was already burdened with the weight of the investigation. Hearing of the threats only deepened his determination to protect her, though his ability to do so was limited by his own precarious position. Winter descended upon the Abbey, and with it came an unsettling stillness. One night, as icy winds howled through the stone corridors, the power suddenly went out. The Abbey was plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the flickering candles hurriedly lit by the nuns. Fear gripped the residents as they huddled together, reciting prayers for safety. In the chaos, Helen's absence went unnoticed at first. It wasn't until the power returned, casting dim light through the Abbey's halls, that someone realized she was missing. A frantic search began, with nuns and clergy combing through every room and corridor. The search ended in the chapel, where a horrifying discovery awaited them. Helen's lifeless body was found sprawled at the foot of the altar, her hands still clutching a string of prayer beads. Around her, the beads were scattered like fallen leaves, creating an eerie scene of disarray. The sight sent waves of shock and grief through the Abbey. Helen's pale face, frozen in an expression of anguish, left little doubt that her death was no accident. The authorities were immediately called, and the chapel was cordoned off. Investigators arrived swiftly, treating the scene with meticulous care. Early observations ruled out natural causes, confirming the suspicions that her death was both violent and deliberate. Chris was devastated. Already under scrutiny for his alleged connection to Helen, he now found himself in an even more precarious position. His erratic behavior, combined with the earlier discovery of the journal, painted him as the prime suspect in the eyes of many. The whispers among the nuns turned into pointed accusations, and the once revered abbot now faced the grim reality of being accused of a heinous crime. The sacred walls of the Abbey, once a symbol of faith and sanctuary, now bore witness to a tragedy that shattered its peace. For Chris, Helen's death was not only a personal loss but also the final act in a series of events that threatened to destroy everything he had devoted his life to protecting. The investigation into Helen's death consumed the Abbey, leaving no corner untouched by the probing eyes of law enforcement. The once peaceful refuge was now a crime scene, its serene atmosphere replaced by the sharp edge of suspicion. Forensic experts scoured the chapel and surrounding areas for clues, piecing together fragments of evidence. The initial findings only deepened the mystery. Helen had ingested a rare and potent poison, commonly found in the Abbey's herb garden, but there was no clear trail to the culprit. Attention immediately turned to Chris. His documented internal struggles in the journal, combined with his known closeness to Helen, placed him under intense scrutiny. Interrogations became relentless, and every action from his past was re-examined under the harsh light of suspicion. While Chris vehemently denied any involvement in Helen's death, his erratic behavior during the weeks leading up to the tragedy made him an easy target. As investigators delved deeper, they uncovered an alarming new thread. Among the nuns, one finally broke under the pressure of questioning. She confessed to planting the journal in Chris's quarters, claiming she had grown jealous of the attention he paid to Helen. Her intentions, she insisted, were never to harm anyone but rather to discredit Chris and push him away from the Abbey. She denied any role in Helen's death, and her confession, while shocking, left the case far from resolved. The breakthrough came when investigators discovered a series of letters hidden in Helen's belongings. The letters revealed a part of her past that she had carefully concealed, a history of abuse at the hands of a former partner. She had fled from him to seek refuge in the Abbey, but the letters showed that he had managed to track her down. The language in the correspondence grew increasingly threatening, hinting at an obsession that hadn't waned despite their separation. The investigation widened, leading authorities to a nearby town where Helen's former partner was eventually found. He was living under an assumed name, his presence concealed until the mounting evidence forced him out of hiding. When confronted, he confessed to poisoning Helen. Consumed by anger and rejection, he had posed as a pilgrim to gain access to the Abbey and enacted his cruel revenge under the guise of devotion. The resolution of the case brought no solace to the Abbey. Though Chris was cleared of wrongdoing, his reputation was irreparably damaged. The bishop, fearing further scandal, removed him from his position, relegating him to a life of quiet penance far from the public eye. The remaining nuns tried to rebuild, but the Abbey's sanctity was forever marred by the tragedy. Helen's death became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities hidden within even the holiest of places. The dark secret of the abbot and the nun became an enduring story of human frailty, misplaced trust, and the destructive power of secrets.